It's June 3rd, 2nd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the final day of official campaigning ahead of Tuesday's presidential election. The Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung is sticking around the capital area to woo voters, while the People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo will campaign across the country, from Jeju Island up to Seoul. The Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok is finalizing his campaign trail in Daegu City. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping will speak soon on trade issues, including a dispute over critical minerals, U.S. officials have confirmed. Trump, in the meantime, continues to pressure the courts that there are possible ruling against his tariffs will ruin his country. At least 31 Palestinians were reportedly killed while trying to get aid in Gaza after claims that the Israeli forces opened fire on the crowd. The Israeli military and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation deny the claims. In less than 24 hours from now, the people of South Korea head to polling stations to elect their 21st president. The Liberal camp's Lee Jae-myung will wrap up his 22-day official campaign period at Seoul's Yeouido Park, where he is expected to focus on the message of ending insurrection. Our correspondent Shin-ayoung reports.
Ahead of Tuesday's election, Lee has embarked on a final day of campaigning. After holding rallies in Seoul and the surrounding metropolitan area on Monday, he will hold his last major rally this evening at Yeouido Park in western Seoul. Yeouido is home to the National Assembly, where a vote put an end to December's martial law saga. It's also where protesters spent a cold winter calling for the impeachment of former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Just like at the start of his campaign, he is expected to highlight his Revolution of Light message and emphasize his commitment to ending what he describes as insurrection. Meanwhile, he wrapped up his final weekend of campaigning with visits to the conservative-leaning southeastern region of the country, including Gyeongsang-buk-do Province, Daegu, Ulsan, and Busan. During his speech in Ulsan on Sunday, he emphasized the need for balanced regional growth.
South Korea must shift to balanced growth to keep developing. Busan, Ulsan, and Gyeongsang-namdo are hard to navigate without a car. Better infrastructure like transportation and targeted policies are needed to connect them.
He reiterated the significance of the upcoming election, emphasizing the need to end insurrection and hold those responsible accountable.
It's important to think about why this election is happening. It was triggered by an insurrection and is part of the effort to overcome it. On June 3rd, it will be decided whether the forces behind the insurrection return to power or are defeated.
He also urged voters to cast their ballots to exercise their sovereignty, saying that votes are more powerful than bullets. Shin-ayoung, Arirang News.
Now, for the conservative side, the People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo will travel across the country, literally. From the southernmost island to the capital, he's going to stop by 5 cities before the election period ends. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
The People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo will cross the country on Monday to wrap up his presidential election campaign. On the final day of rallying, Kim will start in the southernmost island of Jeju before traveling north to Busan, Daegu, and Daejeon and holding his finale in the center of Seoul. The finale in front of Seoul City Hall has always been a popular finale spot for election campaigns, including Yoon Suk-yeol. But Kim didn't put any meaning into it.
Well, the last rally is usually at Seoul City Hall. That's why I wouldn't call it a special event. But Seoul is the center of the nation and has a lot of voters. That's probably why the camp choose to do it there.
With the finale being the biggest rally as always and the law permitting big events until 9 p.m. starting early evening, many key PPP figures are also set to appear on the stage to heat up the crowd. This includes other primary contestants who have shown support for Kim. As for his last rallies over the weekend, Kim toured Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces on Saturday, and on Sunday he chose the capital region. With the election coming to an end, Kim showed hope that since the beginning of the election there has been a turnaround and he's looking for an upset.
I've heard some surveys, but it's illegal to post them. I think the table has been turned already, and a big surprise ending is coming.
However, while the party believes it is gaining momentum, there were concerns for the camp, with impeached former President Yoon Suk-yeol relaying a message at a rally for a right-wing activist group saying everyone needs to support Kim. The party's interim chair Kim Yong-tae was quick to respond, saying that while Yoon left the party himself, he was practically kicked out. He also warned Yoon to stay away from the party. Kim Moo-soo also said Yoon is no longer part of the party, distancing himself from the impeached former president, as having such ties could make convincing undecided voters difficult. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And a Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-suk will spend this last day of campaigning with young voters in the capital region and return to the conservative stronghold of Daegu City. Lee on Monday is scheduled to visit Korea Polytechnic University in Gyeonggi-do Province, where he'll join students for a meal at the school cafeteria, his final lunchtime outreach. Afterwards, he'll travel down to Gyeongsan, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province to meet students at Yeongnam University. His final rally will take place at Susang Lake in Daegu City. So we are now just a day away from the June 3rd presidential election, which will finally fill the country's months-long power vacuum. We have our political correspondent Oh Soo-young in studio to discuss how the race currently looks and what could determine its outcome. Welcome back, Soo-young.
Hi, Tammy. It's great to be here again.
So, Soo-young, let's start with the early voting that closed last Friday with quite a high turnout. Now, tell us more, and what might this indicate about this election race?
Right, so 15.4 million out of some 44 million eligible voters for this election, they cast their ballots early this time around. And this reached a figure of 34.74% for the turnout. And it wasn't a record-breaking figure as expected, as the numbers began lagging behind on the second day of voting. But it does still mark the second highest turnout for early voting in a nationwide election since the system was first introduced in 2014. Now, that means over 1 in 3 people have already voted. And by region, the Honam area, traditionally a Democratic Party stronghold, once again recorded the highest turnout, surpassing 50%. And among them, Jeollanam-do province posted the highest early rate at 56.5%. In contrast, though, the lowest turnout was recorded in Daegu, which is, of course, a conservative People Power Party stronghold, and it recorded 25.63%, and that's down from 33.9% in the last presidential election in 2022. Another noteworthy point, early voting rates were lower than the national average in the Seoul capital area, which includes Incheon and Gyeonggi-do province. Now, these areas are considered swing voter strongholds with high proportions of undecided voters. Gyeonggi-do province in particular has the most voters, accounting for 26% of the population, followed by Seoul at 18.7% and Busan at 6.5%. So a high turnout in early voting in progressive regions of the country does indicate, I would say, a stronger leaning towards the Democratic Party candidate, as polls have also consistently shown. But conservative voters, they do have the tendency to cast their votes on the actual election day. And there are, of course, the undecided voters as well. So there's room to flip the race, though with a very small margin, I would say.
Indeed. And speaking of swing voters, you've mentioned it's the people in their 20s and 30s who are a major force in determining the election result.
Right, of course, we've discussed this before, and yes, it does really come down to the swing voter, especially in any election, I would say, with very established political factions. And in Korea's case, against the backdrop of strong regionalism seen over the decades, we're seeing a distinct generational differences emerge as a major factor. Now, people in their 40s and 50s, they tend to be left-leaning, while those in their 60s, 70s and over are traditionally conservative. So this in recent years has led to very tight races. Now, those aged 39 and under, though, they are, of course, significantly smaller, but increasingly they're becoming more significant as their numbers could impact the outcome, as they very much did in the last presidential election.
So the 20s and 30s crowd, they're not really, or they're less tied to any party or any region. So younger voters are done playing by political rules written even before they were born. So they couldn't care less about dusty political brands or who your political mentor was and those kind of stuff. So these young voters, they want real opportunities, real policies that actually make a difference to their lives.
For young voters, their biggest concerns are employment and social security. They want change to reform the overstretched national pension as well as health insurance system, which they're paying for but are unlikely to benefit from. They'd also like to see steps towards environmental sustainability and a vision for the country. Among the 20s and 30s age groups, there has been a growing number of those backing Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok. But of course, his support base is rather precarious, as 20 and 30-somethings tend to have a lower turnout and they're open to changing their minds about the candidate. Of course, Lee Jun-seok also faces some systematic limitations as well as a third-party candidate.
So Korea's presidential election is based on this system, so winner takes all, no runoffs, and that favors the big two parties and that crushes anything in between. So South Korean voters tend to think, why waste my vote on someone who can't win? So they hold their noses and vote for the lesser evil. So compare that to, for example, New Zealand. So since adopting what we call mixed member proportional system in the 90s, the coalition politics has become the norm here.
Now, Seong, I do have to mention again, this is an unusual election as it's occurring 2 years ahead of the actual schedule after the former President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment, right?
That's right. So that means that the next president will take power within a day of after a clear winner is indicated by the polls, and that's likely to be the early hours of Wednesday. We can then expect to see an inauguration ceremony that day, and the next leader assuming his duties right away without a transition committee. So without having a transition committee that helps the new administration learn the ropes, the next government is really going to have to land running. And all three main candidates, they have indicated, though, that they'll first attend to economic matters first.
The first domestic priority must be fixing the economy for ordinary people, period. So whether it's Lee Jae-myung or someone else, there's no room for ceremonial waffle or something. Sky-high prices, unemployment, housing market shocks, and struggling small businesses. Younger people are frustrated about their economic situation. They're crushing the Korean public. So Korean people are not just frustrated, they're exhausted. So the new president must immediately start addressing those cost of living pressures and job market issues, especially for young people.
Well, polls will be open tomorrow on Tuesday from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And of course, we'll be covering it throughout the day live. Thank you, Seong, for coming in today.
Thanks, Tammy. It's been fun covering this with you.
U.S. President Donald Trump is doubling down on tariffs as trade tensions with China escalate and court battles continue. A call with Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected soon, according to White House officials. Our Yeouido has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are expected to speak soon on ongoing trade negotiations, according to White House Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The anticipated phone talks come amid renewed tensions after Trump accused China of breaching a temporary agreement made last month in Geneva. That deal was aimed at easing trade tensions by mutually easing tariffs and trade restrictions. Bessent stressed that China is holding back its exports of rare earth minerals, which are critical for global industrial supply chains. Under the temporary truce, China reduced its tariffs on U.S. imports to 30%, down from the steep 145% level initially imposed in response to Trump's trade measures. Over the weekend, Trump took to his social media platform to say that if the courts somehow rule against the U.S. on tariffs, that would allow other countries to hold the U.S. hostage with their anti-American tariffs. His comments follow the Thursday decision by a federal appeals court to temporarily pause a lower court ruling that had invalidated most of his tariffs. Trump added this would mean the economic ruination of the United States of America. While Trump administration officials say they have other options for imposing tariffs should they ultimately lose the case, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick made it clear there will be no extension to the 90-day pause. In a Sunday interview with Fox News, Lutnick stated, "Rest assured, tariffs are not going away." On Friday, Trump announced he would double tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from 25% to 50%. Yeouido, Arirang News.
The outlook for the Korean economy from major domestic and international institutions is becoming increasingly bleak. More than 20 institutions are forecasting a growth rate under 1% this year, while the average growth rate forecast has fallen to 0.9% in just 4 weeks. France's Societe Generale even forecast 0.3% growth, less than half of the Bank of Korea's forecast of 0.8%. Now, according to the Bank of Korea Monday, as of May 30th, the growth rate forecast for Korea this year from 41 domestic and international institutions ranges from 0.3% to 2.2%. Dozens were killed and over 100 others injured on Sunday when Israeli soldiers reportedly fired at Palestinians at a relief distribution site run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. However, both the Israeli military and the foundation strongly deny the allegation. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Dozens of Palestinians were reportedly killed and over 100 others injured on Sunday, with the Palestinian Civil Defense saying Israeli soldiers at a relief distribution center run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation fired at people seeking food and aid. The AFP says 31 people were killed and over 176 injured in Rafah at a relief distribution site run by the United States and Israel. According to the spokesperson for the Civil Defense, Mahmoud Basal, Israel targeted thousands of civilians. Hamas also released a statement saying that Israel committed a terrible massacre targeting thousands of civilians heading to a distribution center. The Associated Press, citing a witness, said that at around 3 a.m., Israeli soldiers ordered the crowd to disperse and come back later. When a crowd began forming about 1 kilometer from the distribution site, they opened fire. Another witness said that at around 5 a.m., drones and tanks suddenly attacked the relief center, killing several people. However, the Israeli military dismissed the reports in a statement, saying that false reports have been circulating that raise serious suspicions that Israeli soldiers have fired on civilians near a humanitarian aid distribution site, calling it false. The Israeli military explained that no civilians were fired at inside or around the distribution center. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation also issued a press release saying that relief supplies were distributed safely and that Hamas is actively spreading rumors about casualties, which they call untrue and fabricated. The GHF announced that it distributed more than 15,000 boxes of relief supplies on Sunday and that more than 67,000 boxes have been distributed since the site opened last week. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
At a time when the world is facing myriad challenges, an international peace forum brought together pundits from around the world to Korea's Jeju island. Now, among the issues addressed was a possible U.S. troop drawdown from South Korea. Our foreign affairs correspondent, Bae-eun-ji, reports.
A potential troop reduction will not have a negative impact on the U.S. ability to meet treaty obligations to help South Korea defend itself against an attack from North Korea. That's according to retired U.S. Navy Admiral Harry Harris, a former U.S. ambassador to South Korea and a former head of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. Speaking to reporters on Friday at an annual peace forum held on Jeju Island, he stressed that threats in the region from the likes of North Korea, China, or Russia are not isolated from each other.
Again, we have to look at them holistically. And I believe that if is the key word here, if there was a restructuring of some forces in Korea, ultimately it would serve to defend Korea better than it would not.
His comments come after the U.S. is reportedly considering withdrawing around 4,500 troops deployed to South Korea, and as the Trump administration will likely seek to renegotiate a deal on sharing costs for maintaining forces in Korea. Scott Snyder, the head of the Korea Economic Institute of America, who was also at the Jeju Forum, noted that there needs to be a broader discussion on this issue, including in areas such as technology and defense industrial production.
Honestly, I don't think that President Trump could get what he wanted from it last time in the first administration, and it basically failed to be used as a lever. But we have so many other ways that we're cooperating on defense issues in the world, and so there's a lot to be considered.
During his first term, Trump called for a whopping 5-fold increase in Seoul's contribution to maintaining U.S. troops. He will likely seek to renegotiate a deal on this once South Korea has a new president next week. With the Trump administration demanding that Seoul increase its share of defense costs, this issue remains as a crucial challenge for the next Korean government to overcome. 배은지, Arirang News, Jeju.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Ukraine says it has completed its biggest drone operation within Russian territory, reportedly destroying over 40 military aircraft. On Sunday, June 1st, Ukraine's security service announced the successful execution of Operation Spider's Web, targeting multiple Russian air bases. The operation, which took around 18 months to plan, involved 117 drones. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, it damaged 34% of Russia's strategic cruise missile bombers. The attack caused approximately $7 billion in damage. Meanwhile, Russia also launched a significant drone and missile attack on Ukrainian territory overnight on the same day, killing 12 Ukrainian soldiers and injuring over 60 others. All this comes just before the planned second round of peace talks in Istanbul on Monday. Also in Russia, 2 bridges in regions bordering Ukraine collapsed over the weekend, killing at least 7 people and injuring dozens. Russian state media reported that the incidents are being investigated as potential acts of terrorism. On Saturday night, a bridge in Russia's Bryansk region collapsed onto a moving passenger train carrying over 300 people. 7 people were killed and more than 70 others were injured in the disaster. Hours later, early on Sunday, a second bridge collapsed in the neighboring Kursk region, derailing a cargo train and injuring the driver. Both the Bryansk and Kursk regions border Ukraine and have seen a surge in attacks on infrastructure since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Moscow's investigative committee has classified the collapses as terrorist acts. And the state-run Moscow Railways reported that the Bryansk bridge had been blown up in an illegal interference. However, Ukrainian officials have denied the involvement, accusing Russians of staging a false flag operation to manipulate international opinion ahead of the Istanbul negotiations. In Nigeria's Niger State, rescue operations continued over the weekend after at least 200 people died in flooding caused by torrential rain which hit on Thursday. Emergency services said 500 people were still missing and 3,000 residents were displaced in the market town of Mokwa in what is being described as the worst disaster in the area in 6 decades. The National Emergency Management Agency announced on Sunday that it had begun providing relief packages to people affected, and authorities will focus on recovering bodies to prevent potential outbreaks of disease. In the United States, a 16-year-old transgender athlete has secured 2 golds and 1 silver medal at the California Interscholastic Federation State Track and Field Championships, stirring up a controversy over the participation of transgender athletes in a girls' competition. The championships that involved A.B. Hernandez saw protests, with demonstrators displaying signs opposing transgender inclusion in girls' sports. President Donald Trump criticized California's decision to permit Hernandez's participation, threatening to withdraw federal funding from the state.
It's the first commute of June and rain is in the forecast. Wet clouds over the West Sea are moving inland, and starting from Jeju Island, rain will expand to the central western regions and Jeollado provinces this morning, then reach Gyeongsangdo area by the afternoon. And we are expecting some spotty rain for the capital area. Jeju Island could see up to 60 millimeters of showers through tomorrow. The rest of the southern provinces will be seeing 5 to 20 millimeters, but the capital area once again will be seeing some spotty rain, mostly in the morning hours. With the cloudy skies and rain, temperatures will not be climbing much, dropping by 2 to as much as 8 degrees, so we can look forward to some relief from yesterday's early summer heat. Seoul will be getting up to 23 degrees, Daegu topping out at 24 degrees Celsius from yesterday's 31 degrees heat. Then the Seoul metropolitan area will clear by this afternoon, the rain-wise, but for other regions, it will continue until tomorrow morning, which is the presidential election day.
That is all we have for this morning. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful start to the week.